Looks like we're all set.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the 579th board meeting of the California Regional Water Quality Control Board, Central Valley Region. I am Denise Kadara, acting chair of the Central Valley Water Board, and I will introduce our board members in just a few moments. This is the 12th meeting that we are conducting during the COVID-19 emergency. In order to comply with public gathering limitations and physical distancing requirements, and as authorized by the Government Code 11133, there is no physical meeting room. For people who only want to listen or watch the meeting, the board's customary webcast is available. In addition, we are receiving presentations and public comments through a Zoom meeting platform. If you intend to present or comment or think you might be interested in commenting, you should already be in the Zoom room. Using the meeting ID provided on the board's website and the password you received from our staff. If you have not already received a password, you can email us at agenda5@waterboards.ca.gov. That email address is agenda followed by the number 5 with no space at waterboards. Our speaker comment in the subject line so that we can follow up with you. For those in the Zoom meeting, you will be on mute and your camera turned off until it is your turn to speak. Our meeting host, Jean Coughlin from our IT team, will then unmute you and ask you to turn on your computer if you have one. When you are done speaking, the board and the board members have completed asking questions, you will be placed on mute and your camera turned off. We appreciate your patience and understanding during this extraordinary time. And now I will introduce our board members. We have Carmen Ramirez of Atwater. We have Raji Braun of Bakersfield. We have Mark Bradford of Sacramento. We have Sean Yang of Sacramento. Nick Avdis of Sacramento. And I'm Denise Kadar from Allensworth. I will now introduce Executive Officer Patrick Palupa, who will introduce the staff.
Good morning, Acting Chair Kadara, members of the board. This morning we have Assistant Executive Officer Clint Snyder, who runs our Reading office. We have Assistant Executive Officers Adam Lapitz and JJ Baum in our Rancho Cordova office, and Assistant Executive Officer Clay Rogers of our Fresno office. We also have Kelly Garver, our Administrative Officer, and from the Office of Chief Counsel, we have Jessica Yar, Bailey Toft Dupuis, David Lancaster, and Chris Moskell, in addition to a number of staff as well. Welcome again. As I mentioned, I think this is the last of our virtual meetings before we start meeting in person again. My thanks go out to Jean Coughlin in particular, and Bob Chow for all the technical support that they've been providing us for the past couple of years in particular. It is truly a minor miracle whenever we can get one of these meetings off the ground. I think we've, I hope we don't lose sight of that. It really is carefully orchestrated, thing that goes on behind the scenes to get all the materials in front of you for consideration at these virtual meetings. We also have Janelle Brown playing an instrumental role helping to sort through all of the voting and the folks who will be commenting on various items today. So with that, I will return it to you, Acting Chair Kadara.
Yes, also, Patrick, on behalf of our board, we would certainly like to thank our IT unit for the wonderful work they've done in these past 2 years during the pandemic. It's been extraordinary work to have done, but the staff pulled it off well, and we're very grateful to have continuously had our meetings on a regular basis, so we appreciate that. And Carmen, if you will, please lead us in the pledge this morning.
Good morning, it's always an honor. Ready, pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Are there any board member communications this morning? Okay. If not, I think I have one additional one, and I don't know if I mentioned it yesterday. I think it was the 21st of January, I had the Assistant Executive Officer, Clay Rogers, out of the Fresno office, come to our community. We are having problems with cattle feedlots, unregulated. So I had him come out for a visit to visit the sites here in Allensworth on the 21st. And that's the end of my board member comments. Okay, and so we have agenda item 17, but we had that yesterday. State Water Board member, the liaison to the board, Nicole Morgan, gave her a presentation yesterday. And so item 18, public comments. Do we have any public comments this morning, Janelle? Good morning.
We have one. His name is David Anderson.
Jean, will you unmute Mr. Anderson?
Sure, Mr. Anderson, you can unmute.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
We do, yes.
Good morning. Last December 14th, 2021, the Regional Water Board staff conducted a community outreach to the residents in the Mule Creek State Prison area to explain enforcement actions in the past and also explain strategies to bring CDCR into compliance. The board staff established a web page so information and questions could be readily accessed by the public. Questions were encouraged to be asked and staff had promised to respond. On January 7th, 2022, I submitted 16 questions about issues pertaining to Mule Creek Prison and CDCR, which have gone unanswered to date. The questions I have asked were not technical in nature and not difficult by most measures. However, the questions were on point for policy discrepancies or contradictions. I would very much encourage the members of this board to examine those questions to see how policies and practices should be improved in addressing the problems at Mule Creek. It would be meaningful to receive responses to each of my questions. The fourth quarter monitoring and reporting program report submitted by CDCR on February 1st, 2022, strongly indicates that zero progress has been made in terminating illicit discharges into Mule Creek, which I have brought to staff's attention. 1,459,747 gallons of sewage was diverted to the wastewater treatment plant from the storm drain system in the months of October, November, and December. It begs the question, how is that contaminant not being discharged into Mule Creek during a storm event? This is the exact same scenario that resulted in the ACLO fine of $2.5 million in 2020 during implementation of Water Board Order 13267. Today, Water Board Order 13267 has been rescinded without explanation that the conditions which gave rise to the violations have been resolved. In fact, it appears they have not. I remain hopeful that this board will see fit to examine the current situation and take stock of what needs to happen moving forward. Explanations and excuses by staff come too late and are too weak to resolve the massive problems that continue to fester. Direct involvement by any or all of you would be greatly valued. Thank you.
Mr. Anderson, thank you for your public comments. And I do remember this issue, and I would just like to hear from staff what's been done and what about these 17 questions?
Yeah, I can answer that one. I think part of the picture is we're working on getting those answers together, certainly. I think there were a variety of questions asked both of the regional board, of the state board, of the Office of Public Participation, and of the Office of the Comms Office. So there's been a lot of questions coming in on Mule Creek. In addition, we are currently, frankly, petition has been filed by CDCR. We have been engaged primarily on those issues. Mr. Anderson, I think transparency is certainly important to the community. That's why we held the lengthy public outreach in December. That was quite an undertaking by the regional board, and we're still committed to doing another one. I know you provided it was a fairly lengthy list of questions, many of which exceed the scope of kind of what we were initially discussing. So it will take some answering. It's not something we can kind of do very quickly. And like I noted, there was a series of back and forth with CDCR and a petition filed. That really is the focus of our main attention there, making sure that the monitoring and reporting requirements that we've adopted are fulfilled by CDCR. We will certainly work on getting responses to your question, but it's not something where our entire team can drop what they're doing with respect to policing the orders that we've adopted to answer those questions, particularly when it's not really a Public Records Act request. It is questions about internal deliberations and policy questions that are being answered internally by the board, and it's a compliance and enforcement unit.
Okay, and Patrick, what about the spills? Will you address that as well?
That's a subject of the ongoing enforcement actions.
Okay, are there any questions from any board members of Mr. Anderson?
No, but I'll tell Mr. Anderson that the way he prepared his remarks were exactly the way that are helpful to see, because it was concise. We were able to take notes and follow along. So thank you for the questions that you sent. And you can tell, they're being considered and actively being worked on. But thank you for taking the time to tell us in a concise way.
Thank you, Carmen. Any other comments from board members? Mr. Anderson, we do appreciate you coming to the board and expressing your concerns. And as our executive officer has indicated, they are looking into it and following up on it. There are other agencies that are involved with this matter, but you will get some response from our staff soon regarding your concerns. We do appreciate you giving us this matter, bringing it to the board.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity, and I look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you. Janelle, are there any others?
Hey,
No,
Denise.
there are not.
Yes, Sean.
Yeah, this point of clarification. So I don't want to mix things, but so our policies, we could comment toward the public comment, huh? Because my school boards, we cannot comment anything toward public comment. So this is okay.
Well, we can comment, but as Patrick said, it's an ongoing investigation. So and deliberations are underway. So we're limited in what we can say. And Patrick has spoken to the extent of which he can on this matter.
Okay. Yeah, I just want to make that point of clarification. But I too, thrill about the public comments, especially the ones that come back and advocate for what they believe needed to be answered. And I think that's great for the public, great for us. And I just want to thank you for their proactiveness of it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, if we have no further questions, we'll move on to our next agenda item, which is agenda item 19, the statewide general waste discharge requirements for the winery processed water update. At this time, the board will hear an update on the general waste discharge requirements for winery processed water. This is an information item only and no action will be taken, although the board may ask questions and provide direction to staff. After the staff presentation, interested persons will be allowed 3 minutes each to address the board. We will now hear from the staff.
And thank you, Acting Chair Kadara. Again, this was a presentation that Dr. Longley requested. There are a number of facilities of winery facilities within our region that play a fairly significant role in the agricultural economy for the Central Valley. And so this statewide order, which was a fairly significant undertaking by the State Water Board, would regulate in a consistent way wineries across the entire state of California. So this is a really big regulatory undertaking by the State Water Board. That's why we invited Scott and Laurel and the State Water Board's team to give us a little bit of briefing about the way this order was developed and how it works in the Central Valley. And again, my appreciation to Scott and Laurel for coming out and giving this presentation here today. And with that, I'll turn it over to you folks.
Okay. Uh, Good morning, Acting Chair Kadara and members of the board. My name is Scott Couch and I manage the State Water Board's Groundwater Protection section in the Division of Water Quality. I'm joined by Laurel Wardrop, who is a senior environmental scientist over our waste discharge requirements program, and Alex Meshegan, who is the senior water resource control engineer over the Central Valley Water Board's waste discharge requirements permitting program in the Fresno office. We would like to thank you for this opportunity to present on the general order for winery processed water that was adopted by the State Water Board in January 2021. We will refer to this as the statewide order, or the general order throughout the presentation. Next slide, please. I'll start today's presentation by sharing more about the intent of the statewide order and summarizing winery processed water sources and characteristics. State Water Board staff will then describe the order's requirements along with the implementation steps. Next slide, please. The statewide order was designed to protect groundwater and beneficial uses such as drinking water supply from winery discharges. The primary winery constituents of concern are salts from processed water that can accumulate in the soil and affect the health of crops and groundwater quality. Nitrogen from processed water goes through chemical and biological transformations in soil. Processed water generally has low levels of nitrate and higher concentrations of other forms of nitrogen, such as ammonia and organic nitrogen, which can convert to nitrate in soil. Nitrate may be leached below the root zone by percolation and can pose health concerns when there are elevated concentrations in drinking water. Oxygen consuming organic material is measured as biochemical oxygen demand, or BOD. Excessive BOD loading can lead to depletion of oxygen in soil, which slows the soil's natural treatment processes, decreases soil porosity with suspended solids, and can cause odors. The low oxygen conditions can also mobilize naturally occurring metals. The order provides streamlined permitting of winery waste discharges to land by setting a consistent set of control practices, limits, monitoring, and reporting. It supports regional board efforts to efficiently allocate their limited resources to regulate these discharges. Next slide, please. These constituents of concern are found in winery waste, which includes winery processed water and winery processed solids that are generated during the production of wine or grape juice. Crush refers to when grapes are harvested and pressed and is a key production step that generates the most processed water. It typically occurs from mid-August to early November for about 45 to 75 days, though this varies by winery and location. Some wineries operate year-round, generating processed water during the off-season from blending, bottling, and cleaning. The highest flows and highest constituent concentrations are generated during crush. These waste generation activities include the crushing and pressing of grapes and juice extraction, fermentation, clarification, bottling, residuals drainage, and filter washing, cleaning operations and sanitation of equipment, tanks, and barrels, and reverse osmosis brine and boiler or cooler water blowdown. Next slide, please. And now I will turn it over to Laurel Wardrop.
Thank you, Scott, and good morning, everyone. Wineries enrolled in the statewide order may discharge processed water to land through various methods as approved by the regional water boards. These systems typically use ponds or tanks for the storage and treatment of processed water prior to applying to land. The order covers the most typical discharge methods, including the reuse of the processed water for crop irrigation through spray, drip, or subsurface tile systems, or disposal below the land surface, such as from a holding tank to a leach field. Wineries can also discharge to land in areas that are not cropped, and wineries with disposal methods not covered by the order may require coverage under a different regulatory mechanism, such as an individual order or waiver. When a winery applies to enroll in the statewide order, the operations for winery waste, including the disposal methods, are again subject to approval and review by the regional water boards. The order has tiered effluent and loading requirements for applying winery waste to land, and the subsurface effluent limits are for total nitrogen, total suspended solids, and BOD. And the loading limits for land application, like the crop irrigation I mentioned, are meeting agronomic rates for nitrogen and loading limits for BOD. The statewide order development and adoption took over 5 years and included the release of administrative and public drafts, addressing public comments on those drafts, several staff workshops, and the State Water Board's adoption meeting on January 20th, 2021, like Scott mentioned. This slide shows the timeline following order adoption. The blue arrow shows pretty much where we are today. The State Water Board fee unit took the winery fee schedule to State Board in July of 2021, and fees were adopted based on the size of the winery and the volume of winery process water being produced annually. We're now in the preliminary enrollment phase where wineries can apply for coverage, and by late spring, we're hoping to have a developed and deployed phased outreach to winery businesses that don't currently have winery waste permitting and have an electronic application process. The order requires existing wineries enrolled by January 2024. However, if a winery is aware that this order applies to them, they shouldn't wait till that deadline and should enroll now. If there's any questions on if the winery order applies to the facility, they can reach out to staff, and our contact information will be at the end of this presentation. The map at the left on this slide shows the general distribution of wineries in California. We have many wineries throughout the state, and they're pretty much in every region. The State Water Board order, is intended to cover most of the wineries in California. And we estimate, and it's rough at this point, that it's about 1,500 wineries statewide. The current priority is enrolling wineries without any current water board waste permit coverage. The order does require new wineries to be designed for compliance before they begin to operate, and they're required to apply for coverage at least 180 days before the potential to discharge to land. The regional water boards will be working with wineries currently with winery waste permitting over the next few years to determine if coverage under the statewide order is applicable to their operations. For example, some wineries may stay covered in their individual orders or waste discharge requirements because they're producing over 15 million gallons of processed water per year. They have recycled water disposal operations subject to Title 22 drinking water standards and requirements, or they might have site conditions in those individual orders that are more protective of the statewide order. Some wineries will also not be required to enroll due to the low volume of processed water they're producing, and these are subject to local requirements or any applicable regional water board waivers that cover those discharges. I'll now pass it to Alex Mishagan, who will go over some of the regional statistics for permitted wineries in the Central Valley region.
Good morning. Thank you, Laurel. I'll quickly discuss how wineries are currently permitted by the Central Valley Water Board. Wineries are either permitted by individual waste discharge requirements, also referred to as WDRs, or enrolled under the Small Food Processor Waiver, Resolution R5-2020-0002. Wineries are potentially eligible for coverage under the Small Food Processor Waiver if the winery generates less than 1 million gallons of wastewater per year and meet the other conditions of discharge specified in the waiver. As shown in the table, the majority of the 126 wineries currently permitted by the Central Valley Water Board are out of our Rancho Cordova office. These 126 wineries will be evaluated over time for applicability for coverage under the new statewide general order. But as Laurel mentioned, staff's priority initially will be to work on enrolling unpermitted wineries under the winery general order. State board staff are preparing a letter notifying potential unpermitted wineries of the winery general order and requesting each winery to fill out a survey to determine if enrollment under the general order is required. We anticipate approximately 450 to 800 winery businesses within the Central Valley will receive this letter in phased mailouts. As responses to this letter come in, Central Valley Water Board staff will work with State Board staff to answer questions and work on enrolling wineries under the winery general order. I'll now hand it back to Laurel, who will discuss some of the specifics of the winery general order.
Thanks, Alex. The next few slides provide a high-level overview of the statewide order tiers, structure, and requirement. It is a pretty hefty order, so I hope the summary is helpful. The order establishes an exempt category where there's no fee or registration required for the small wineries producing up to 10,000 gallons of wastewater per year. It establishes regulatory tiers and associated annual fees for facilities producing between 10,000 gallons and 15 million gallons of processed water per year. The order uses gallons of processed water produced instead of volume of wine produced to focus the requirements on the potential impacts of waste discharges to land instead of how much a business is producing of their product. We received many comments on the tiers, and many discussions revolved around the tier cutoffs and the requirements for each tier when we were developing the order. The tiers were arrived at through a review of public input, the requirements in existing regional orders, and an estimated potential threat to water quality. The adopted annual fees range from $750 to $19,000 per facility per year, depending on the tier and gallons of processed water produced annually. The tiered fee schedule also includes a 10% reduction for enrollment in a water board accepted sustainability program and a 50% reduction for wineries overseen by an accepted local agency oversight program. And currently only Napa County has expressed interest to be in that local agency oversight role. This slide shows some examples of winery facilities compared in size from small, maybe a tier 1 or 2 facility on the left to a tier 4 winery on the bottom right. There are a lot of tiered requirements in the statewide order not covered in detail today, but in general, the requirements increase and the fees as the facility goes into a larger tier and has a greater potential to impair surface or groundwater beneficial uses. That said, here are some of the key regulatory areas of the order. Tier 1 through 4 wineries must enroll in the order and complete requirements such as annual reporting. Tier 1 wineries are primarily required to manage processed water treatment, constituents, and disposal through general management practices such as controlling odors, runoff to surface waters, and reporting their winery effluent flow. Most of the new tiered requirements fall under tier 2 through 4, and some of the key areas are for monitoring and reporting, processed water pond sizing and liner requirements, land application areas where there are loading limits, and on-site practices to ensure discharge doesn't cause a nuisance, run off to surface waters, or impact water quality. For subsurface disposal systems, there are applicable effluent limits and requirements to ensure the systems are maintained and operated as designed to be protective of groundwater. And there are requirements to manage solids applied on-site or taken off-site for proper disposal. We're now going to dive into salts, which include sodium and chloride, and they are in winery processed water or rinse water and are constituents of concern. Salts in elevated concentrations can have the potential to reduce soil health and reach groundwater, where it can impact uses such as industrial and drinking supply. The statewide order salt control requirements for all tiers are aimed at source control of added salts from their processing activities. It's very difficult and can be costly to remove salts once they're in solution or in the water. The source control practices are an important control strategy and include reducing the amount of chemicals used to contribute salts, or lowering the volume of processed water produced by using cleaning methods that use a low amount of water or no water. In addition, tier 2 through 4 wineries are required to monitor salt loading through fixed dissolved solids, or FDS. These are the non-biodegradable components of salts, and they can accumulate in the soil and can disrupt the ability of the soil to treat the processed water prior to reaching groundwater. Compliance is determined through an FDS effluent threshold of 320 milligrams per liter, plus the facility's source or supply water, which is measured in the winery effluent before going to land or a pond. A threshold means it's not a violation to exceed the value, but it is a violation not to complete the required actions when that exceedance happens. If the threshold is exceeded, the required actions for a tier 2 or 3 winery is to submit a site-specific salt control plan when required by the regional water board. For tier 4 wineries, they're required to submit a salt control plan if the threshold is exceeded. I want to note dischargers may elect to participate in a salt and nutrient management plan or sustainability program that addresses winery salt loading instead of implementing a site-specific salt control plan. I will now pass the presentation to Alex to go over some of the Central Valley Regional Board specific salt and nutrient requirements.
Thank you, Laurel. I'll briefly discuss the salt and nitrate control programs adopted by the Central Valley Water Board in 2018 and how it relates to the winery general order. As a quick refresher, the Central Valley Water Board adopted Basin Plan amendments incorporating the new salt and nitrate control programs as a result of the collaborative stakeholder initiative known as the Central Valley Salinity Alternatives for Long-Term Sustainability, also referred to as CV salts. The goal and the priorities of these programs are to 1, ensure safe drinking water supply, both short and long term, 2, achieve balanced salt and nitrate loading, and 3, implement long-term managed restoration of impaired water bodies. As previously mentioned, wastewater from wineries, like many other food processing facilities in the Central Valley, have high salinity and nitrogen concentrations. Therefore, staff expects most wineries to participate in the salinity prioritization and optimization study, also referred to as P&O study, for the salinity control program, and participate in the local management zone for the nitrate control program. By participating in the P&O study for the salt control program, wineries are required to support the P&O study and maintain current performance levels, but are allowed to defer more stringent and costly requirements until requirements are reevaluated after completion of phase 1 of the P&O study. For the nitrate control program, wineries that join a local management zone work collectively with other dischargers to address nitrate issues within their management zone. By participating in the local management zone, wineries receive an exemption from the nitrate standard. As the general order was being drafted, Central Valley Water Board staff worked closely with State Board staff to ensure that the general order complemented the work currently being done through CV salts. The requirements for the salt and nitrate control programs are incorporated in the winery general order. Therefore, any winery applying for coverage under the general order must demonstrate compliance with both programs as part of the application. For wineries that participate in the P&O study and join the local management zone, the winery general order grants certain exemptions to some of the salinity and nitrate requirements, respectively specified in the general order. And I'll pass it back to Laurel, who will discuss some of the winery general order monitoring and reporting requirements.
Thanks again, Alex. The statewide order includes a model monitoring and reporting program, which means that the final monitoring and reporting program requirements are issued with the notice of applicability of coverage. The report requirements generally include an annual report due March 1st, and then a semi-annual report due March 1st and August 1st for groundwater monitoring, which is primarily for Tier 4 wineries. The monitoring requirements in the order provide flexibility to account for a variety of different winery operations, where compliance points are tiered based on the size of the winery. The monitoring locations are dependent on the winery features. For example, pond monitoring is not required if they're not using processed water ponds. Our goal is to have the water quality monitoring data submitted in the GeoTracker database. This effort will require staff time to coordinate with analytical laboratories and wineries submitting the water quality results and reports. The statewide order allows the use of water board accepted sustainability programs and salt nutrient management plan participation instead of the site-specific reporting requirements for nitrogens and salt. And as mentioned earlier, there's reduced fees for wineries enrolled in an accepted sustainability program. We believe that communities, including disadvantaged communities, will be supported by the beneficial use protections of the order, such as protections for industrial and drinking supply from salt and nitrogen impacts. The order supports sustainable water use goals through the beneficial reuse of processed water for possible aquifer recharge, and allows the crop irrigation using winery processed water, and ensures pond sizing is for large storm events regardless of the seasonality of our rain events. The order encourages on-farm composting and reuse of winery processed solid materials on-site to support the Governor Healthy Soil initiatives to sequester carbon as parts of addressing climate change. Wineries also have an incentive to reduce the volume of water supply they use to produce wine, because if they're on a cusp between a smaller or larger tier, the winery could be assigned a lower tier, which is usually less work if they're producing less processed water. As mentioned, state and regional board staff are working on the development of an electronic application process and a statewide phase notification effort for wineries to enroll. We're also developing additional guidance and templates to assist the regulated community, and those get posted on our statewide webpage as they become available. We'll continue to work closely with the regional boards and interested parties on these materials. Thank you again for your time, and this concludes our presentation. Listed here are the staff contact information and where to sign up for the State Board's LIRIS email list for this order and our webpage link, and we're happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much for that comprehensive presentation. I would like to ask the board, do you have any questions or comments regarding the presentation?
I have some questions, Acting Chair. I'm wondering, are there public commenters that are going to speak on this item, or?
Oh, I'm sorry, that would be the next question. Now, do we have anyone's public comments on this item?
We do not.
Okay. Go ahead, please, Nick. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So a question here on these wineries. I think I understand that wineries are subject to multiple levels of reporting requirements. Is that correct in terms of different programs? Like, for example, the irrigation nitrogen management plans for the ILRP, stormwater plans for their facilities, and then this permit. Is that correct?
Yeah, if some wineries do have crop irrigation, and if they do and they have commercial grape growing, they could have an irrigated lands permit. And then some facilities also discharge industrial stormwater to a surface water. And so there are wineries that may have those three things happening, where they are discharging waste to land, they're irrigating crops with multiple sources of water, and they are discharging stormwater to a surface water.
So has there been any discussion at the staff level about whether there are efficiencies in sort of consolidating some of these permits? Because it seems like there could be some efficiencies had by streamlining reporting requirements for these overlapping permits. Is that something that's been looked at?
So
There were
comments. We've looked at that. I think that the biggest difficulty is in the federal requirements shift quicker than the state requirements. So where we've had facilities that have been regulated under combined federal and state permits, on occasion it's kind of been a disaster because the federal permit needs to be updated. That is often not subject to CEQA. And when you connect the two, you also have to update the state permit, which is subject to CEQA, which kicks off a really inefficient process. And then the individual discharger is often kicked into a CEQA process where they wouldn't ordinarily be if you're just updating the federal permit. So there's actually a strong interest in the industry to keep at least the federal permit separate from the state permit so that they can kind of go on their own regulatory tracks as kind of state requirements shift different than federal requirements. With respect to the ILRP, I think there are certain efficiencies in terms of how they manage their acreage. So I don't hear a lot of requests from the industry to kind of, it would be basically like an individual permit to regulate their facility, separate and apart from the coalition requirements. So in both those areas, the coalition is the efficiency for the monitoring and reporting when they do have irrigated acreage that is a combined facility. But a lot of these, kind of as Laurel indicated, these are kind of standalone facilities, a lot of them. They're not ones that necessarily manage their own, grape growing cropland next to them. Some of them do, but I think that's not, most of these kind of process grapes. It might be a related entity that they get the grapes from, but most of these are kind of standalone businesses doing the processing from the acreage that's doing the grape growing.
It sounds like, I suppose if there was an issue with this, we would have heard from industry, so that nobody's here. So I don't want to go too deep into this. It was just kind of a question that I had. So if it was that much of an issue, people.
The industry had probably dozens of conversations with each one of the executive officers, primarily myself, the executive officer in Region 2, which covers Napa and Solano counties, which had real complexity that had to be addressed. And then I think Region 3 in particular had a lot of conversations too, to kind of get all the requirements synced up. So they made their voice known, and Laurel and Scott and the team that was drafting this permit. I don't even want to count how many conversations you've had with the kind of wine industry and winery industry. So their concerns were absolutely heard. I think the idea was to really get some state standardization here. And so this is truly a cooperative effort. It's one of the reasons why I think, State Board actually had a permit kind of drafted in the first year, and then spent 4 years working with the industry groups to kind of get it synced up for all the region's purposes.
I was going to, I agree with that. I will say we probably spent 3 to 4 years meeting and discussing and reviewing this idea of efficiencies between different permits during the development of the order.
And then a very small detailed scale board member, when there's an irrigated lands monitoring, some of that will feed into the winery order monitoring. So the monitoring in some cases is not duplicative, but it will help support the winery order, and they can use that monitoring, those requirements if it's applicable to the order. So we're hoping that works, where the monitoring from irrigated lands, if applicable, feeds into the winery order requirements. But I know it's a challenge for industry, and we do really appreciate them giving us their information and time to address some of these concerns.
I appreciate that color. Thank you.
I guess I had a little bit of a question on how the wineries can manage their expenses under this program. It seems you broke down the tiers very well. So the smaller wineries are excluded and so on, up to the big wineries. Obviously the fees are one thing, and then the monitoring and reporting are another, as Nick is kind of alluding to. It seems like the wineries have an opportunity though to manage their discharge concentrations by dilution. Have you had discussions about that? I know, the old adage, dilution is not the source of or the solution to pollution, but isn't there in some incentive to do that, to monitor their discharge and adjust it by dilution in order to avoid some of the triggers without pushing them into another tier though?
It is possible, but then it complicates things. If they're going to do that, then they are discharging more wastewater, right, and they could get into another tier and face another set of requirements for that. But it is possible that someone would add additional fresh water to keep their concentration down.
Right.
And it comes.
As I say, water is expensive though, so.
Exactly, and there's a constituent loading for the plant. If they're growing crops, they're going to be trying to monitor the constituent loading there. I think this order does incentivize control of the constituents in pre-treatment or in their efficient practices, and try to reduce the volume of processed water, but encourages, if you have it, reuse it to irrigate crops or aquifer recharge where appropriate.
And they may need to add some additional fresh water so that they don't kill their crop.
Sure.
Which they don't want to do.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
So this is Carmen. The question that I had is, Laurel, you were describing how some wineries are covered under small food processor permits. Can you explain what, I mean, I don't know if there's a short way to do it, but how that structure is going to be different, or is it going to sort of absorb those? Or are they going to be allowed to remain separate from the wine?
Yeah, I can kick it off, and then I think the Central Valley might want to talk about their waiver in particular. But so this statewide order kind of came midstream of the regional boards doing general orders and waivers for wineries, because we have a lot of them in California. If you've noticed, we're very blessed. Given that, the regional boards will be able to kind of assess what's the most appropriate regulatory mechanism for a winery. They have a lot of tools. They have their waivers. They now have the statewide order. They have individual orders, and some regions have general orders. So they'll be looking at which one's the most protective of water quality and moving wineries over as appropriate as defined. We haven't started that work yet because there's potentially 1,000 or so wineries that currently don't have any regulatory coverage. And it's a little bit of an on-level playing field if that's the case of wineries that are currently complying with some type of mechanism. So I'll defer to Patrick and Alex and the other Region 5 folks on the call.
Yeah, no, and I think there's actually been an effort kind of in our region. There's been a few facilities that have downshifted. We've looked at some of these facilities, frankly, and Alex has been leading the charge. So what has bumped up some of the, we've been regulating these facilities with the melange of different orders. Some of them are under our small food processor order. Some of them, for various reasons, are under individual orders. The really big facilities within our region are probably going to stay under individual orders because they have site-specific requirements that they've worked on. Some of the Gallo facilities are ginormous operations that are really good at what they do. And so they will probably stay under their own individual orders. But what has been forcing the issue for some of the very small facilities has been CV salt requirements. And some of the facilities that would essentially fall in the very lowest tier were being regulated under a more restrictive permit by the Central Valley Water Board, at least pre-CV salts. So we've been downshifting a few permits here and there and taking a look at some facilities that would fall below the thresholds. Every once in a while, there's a bottling facility where it's really kind of a micro scale facility where they're essentially measuring their discharge in, hundreds of gallons a year, 200, 300 to, got a little bit of acreage there. It's really not going to be that much of a problem. And so if they're really at that de minimis level, we have been kind of working through some of those issues with CV salts. But the intent really, I think Laurel kind of encapsulated it, is to get everybody on a level playing field, and everybody regulated under one of these tiers. So we're going to continue our push to kind of get facilities under this standardized order, not only for efficiencies on our end, because it's a lot more efficient to regulate these facilities through a general order than it is individual orders, but also because we do respect the fact that we want similar industries competing on similar footing within our region. I don't know if Alex wants to add any more to that. I will say, I really appreciate Alex's involvement in the project. There was a wrap up done recently to kind of the executive group and across all the water boards, and I think there's a lot of credit given to this team. Even though it took a lot longer, there was an incredible amount of coordination that was kind of being handled through the state board, Scott's team, with each and every one of the regional boards that would be affected by this and the industry groups that would be affected by this. It took a long time, but I think it wound up with a really good product. Alex, I'll defer to you if there's any other kind of.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. The only thing I would mention as far as moving forward, as Patrick mentioned, we have a lot of large wineries that probably wouldn't be able to be eligible for the general order, or a good amount of them. And then a good majority of the wineries we currently permit are under that waiver. And the waiver does need to be renewed every 5 years. So we're starting these conversations of the waivers was issued in 2020 on how we want to go about moving wineries from our waiver into the general order. So that's on our radar and trying to figure out a game plan. So we have one set when we get to the renewal of the waiver. That's all. Thanks.
Okay. Are there any other questions from board members? Comments? Yeah, the only question or comment I had was in the transitioning to the electronic enrollment. I'm sure it's taken quite an amount of time to get to this point, but it should help as far as streamlining this process for all the paperwork and the wineries having to respond to all the documents that are needed. It's come a long way for you guys to get to this point.
That's the intent, Acting Chair Kadara. I couldn't have said it better. We're hoping that it's efficient and a workable process for industry, but we have a real passion for it, and I really hope that it all works out as intended.
Okay. Any other questions from board members or comments? Okay, well, Scott and Laurel and Alex, we really appreciate your thorough report, and we wish you well as you continue to work through this process, and our staff is working with you, so we're looking for some good results in this process and report back on how things are going. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, our next item on the agenda is agenda item 20, tribal and subsistence fishing beneficial uses definitions to the water quality control plans for the Sacramento River and San Joaquin River basins and the Tulare Lake Basin, consideration of a resolution. This is the time and place. This is the time and place for a hearing to consider adoption of a resolution that would add tribal and subsistence fishing beneficial uses definitions to the water quality control plans for the Sacramento River and San Joaquin River basins and Tulare Lake Basin. This proceeding will be conducted in accordance with the notice of public hearing and meeting procedures published in the meeting agenda. At this time, evidence should be introduced on whether the proposed actions should be taken. All persons expected to testify, raise your right hand and take the following oath. And as you take the oath, you can just press the raise your hand button. Do you swear the testimony you are about to give is the truth? If so, please say I do.
I do.
Okay, thank you. And then please state your name, address, affiliation, and whether you've taken the oath before you testify. Following the staff presentation, interested persons will have 3 minutes each to address the board. A timer will be used. Does the council have any legal issues to discuss at this time?
Not at this time, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. We will now proceed with the staff presentation. Jean?
Yes, Lauren is sharing her screen.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, Acting Chair Kadara and members of the board. I'm Lauren Smitherman, a Senior Environmental Scientist Supervisor in the Planning Section. I'm joined by Gabby Gundry, our Civic Spark Fellow. Civic Spark is a AmeriCorps state program that places early career professionals in local and state agencies for an 11-month fellowship to address California climate change, sustainability, and environmental justice issues. We have both taken the oath and are presenting on the proposed amendments to the water quality control plans for the Sacramento River and San Joaquin River basins and Tulare Lake Basin to add the tribal tradition and culture, tribal subsistence fishing, and subsistence fishing beneficial use definitions. We are requesting the board's consideration for adoption of the amendments. Gabby will talk about the beneficial use definitions in a few minutes. Our purpose is to adopt these beneficial use definitions into the basin plans. In this presentation, we will discuss an overview of the Central Valley Water Board's basin plans, the purpose of adopting the tribal tradition and culture, or CUL, the tribal subsistence fishing, or TSUB, and subsistence fishing, or SUB beneficial uses. We will also discuss the CUL, TSUB, and SUB beneficial use definitions, the CUL, TSUB, and SUB beneficial uses history, tribal exposure pathways, comments and letters received, staff recommendations, and next steps. Under the Porter-Cologne Water Quality Control Act, water quality control plans or basin plans are required by the 9 regional water boards to regulate water quality. Basin plans contain designated beneficial uses for both surface and groundwater bodies in the basins, water quality objectives to protect those beneficial uses, implementation plans to achieve water quality objectives, and descriptions of the surveillance and monitoring activities needed to determine regulatory compliance and assess the health of the basin's water resources. California's Constitution mandates that any water to which someone's been given a right must be put to beneficial use. If beneficial use definitions are adopted into regional basin plans, a separate basin plan amendment may occur to designate the beneficial use or uses to a particular water body or water body segment. This map, presented by Robert LaRue during yesterday's board meeting, provides a visual of the Central Valley Water Board's basins and areas of jurisdiction. The Central Valley Water Board has jurisdiction over water quality in the Sacramento and San Joaquin River basins and Tulare Lake Basin. The tribal tradition and culture, tribal subsistence fishing, and subsistence fishing beneficial uses were developed to protect activities specific to Native American culture and tribes' historic use of California's waters, including practices not covered by existing beneficial uses. However, the function of these beneficial uses are not to protect or enhance fish populations or aquatic habitats. These beneficial uses were developed as a result of years of activism, studies, and advocacy by Native American tribes and other parties. They are tied to mercury water quality objectives and are the only beneficial uses that specifically mention California Native American tribes in their definition. The state defines a California Native American tribe as a federally recognized California tribal government listed on the most recent notice of the Federal Register, or a non-federally recognized California tribal government on the California Tribal Consultation List, maintained by the California Native American Heritage Commission. After the beneficial use definitions are adopted into the basin plans, the process to designate water bodies with the beneficial uses may then occur. Now, I'll turn the presentation over to Gabby to further describe the beneficial use definitions and history and potential tribal exposure pathways.
The tribal tradition and culture, or CUL, beneficial use, is defined as uses of water that support the cultural, spiritual, ceremonial, or traditional rites or lifeways of California Native American tribes, including but not limited to navigation, ceremonies, or fishing, gathering, or consumption of natural aquatic resources, including fish, shellfish, vegetation, and materials. Next slide, please. The tribal subsistence fishing, or T-sub beneficial use, is defined as uses of water involving the non-commercial catching or gathering of natural aquatic resources, including fish and shellfish, for consumption by individuals, households, or communities of California Native American tribes to meet needs for sustenance. Next slide, please. The subsistence fishing, or sub-beneficial use, is defined as uses of water involving the non-commercial catching or gathering of natural aquatic resources, including fish and shellfish, for consumption by individuals, households, or communities to meet needs for sustenance. The subsistence fishing beneficial use does not mention California Native American tribe and its definition, but is grouped with the tribal tradition and culture and tribal subsistence fishing beneficial uses because it may still be of interest to and can still be utilized by California Native American tribes, tribal members, as well as other interested persons or members of the public. Next slide, please. In 2011, Governor Brown signed Executive Order B-1011 into law. B-1011 states that every state agency and department subject to the governor's executive control shall encourage communication and consultation with California Native American tribes. Governor Brown signed Assembly Bill 52, or AB 52, into law in 2014. AB 52 establishes certain tribal consultation requirements aimed to help avoid or minimize project impacts on tribal cultural resources. A tribal cultural resource is a site, feature, place, cultural landscape, or sacred place or object which is of cultural value to a tribe. In 2017, the State Water Board adopted the Statewide Inland Surface Waters, Enclosed Bays, and Estuaries Plan. This plan defined the tribal tradition and culture, tribal subsistence fishing, and subsistence fishing beneficial uses. Because these beneficial use definitions are not actually contained within each region's basin plans yet, each region must amend their basin plans for these definitions to be adopted and for water bodies to be protected. Input from California Native American tribes play an important role in this process and can influence if, where, when, and how these beneficial uses are designated. Since the State Water Board's adoption of the Statewide Inland Surface Waters, Enclosed Bays, and Estuaries Plan, Central Valley Water Board has conducted and is continuing to conduct tribal outreach and engagement. In 2021, Central Valley Water Board began receiving tribal tradition and culture and tribal subsistence fishing designation requests from participating tribes on a rolling basis, and is in the initial steps of developing a process for the designation of the tribal tradition and culture beneficial use for requested water bodies. Next slide, please. Tribal members may potentially have increased exposure to water pollutants due to tribal tradition and culture or subsistence practices specific to California Native American tribes. Water pollutants may expose tribal members through the ingestion of water, ingestion of aerosols and particulates, dermal exposure, ingestion of plants, and ingestion of animals. Current water quality standards may not be sufficient to protect California Native American tribes from potential increased exposure to water pollutants and water bodies that are used for traditional and cultural practices and subsistence fishing. Next slide, please. This chart, developed by Sarah Ryan with Big Valley Band of Pomo Indians and Karuk Tribe, illustrates tribal exposure pathways in the event of a freshwater harmful algal bloom event. However, it may also represent tribal exposure pathways to other water pollutants. The symbols at the bottom of the chart represent the 5 potential exposure pathways of water pollutants to tribal members. Exposure pathways vary by tribal activity. For example, the consumption of aquatic animals, such as fish, may potentially expose tribal members to water pollutants through the ingestion of water, ingestion of animals, ingestion of aerosols and particulates, and dermal exposure. The tribal subsistence fishing and subsistence fishing beneficial uses may require new water quality objectives to be developed that are protective of a higher rate of fish consumption. Now I'll turn the presentation back over to Lauren to discuss comments and letters received, staff recommendations, and next steps. Next slide, please.
The Central Valley Water Board received 5 comments on the proposed amendments from the following tribes and tribal organizations. All comments received were in support of adding the tribal tradition and culture, tribal subsistence fishing, and subsistence fishing beneficial use definitions to the basin plans. Board staff will continue to coordinate with tribes and tribal organizations following the proposed incorporation of these beneficial use definitions. Board staff would also like to ensure tribes and tribal organizations that letters submitted to the Central Valley Water Board during the 2018 and 2021 triennial review comment periods and an additional letter board staff received pertaining to tribal beneficial uses will be included within the project's administrative record. We will additionally include these letters within the applicable tribal beneficial use designations administrative record. Board staff recommends adoption of the proposed amendments to the water quality control plans for the Sacramento River and San Joaquin River basins and Tulare Lake Basin to add the tribal tradition and culture, tribal subsistence fishing, and subsistence fishing beneficial use definitions. The Central Valley Water Board is continuing to develop the beneficial use designation process. Board staff are prioritizing the designation of the tribal tradition and culture beneficial use and will coordinate with interested tribes throughout the designation request submission process. If a tribe is interested in submitting a designation request, please contact board staff as needed. Water body designation requests for the tribal tradition and culture and tribal subsistence fishing beneficial uses may be submitted by California Native American tribes to Central Valley Water Board staff on a rolling basis and must contain evidence demonstrating usage of the considered water bodies for the requested beneficial use or uses. Separate basin plan amendments will occur to designate requested water bodies. A tribal update meeting is scheduled to be held virtually on April 5th, 2022, and more information will be sent out with a save the date email within the next few weeks. As a response to questions regarding the Basin Plan amendment process, board staff are developing a basin planning fact sheet to describe the tribal beneficial use designation process and Central Valley Water Board's Basin Plan amendment requirements. Board staff are also assisting the State Water Board to develop a statewide basin planning fact sheet describing the tribal beneficial use designation process. Both fact sheets are tentatively scheduled to be released by the tribal update meeting on April 5th. Taryn Sahota is also technical staff who could not join us today, but will be the lead staff person for the tribal beneficial use designation process. Robert LaRue will maintain his role as a Central Valley Water Board's tribal coordinator throughout this project. We thank the board members, tribes, tribal organizations that have been involved in this process for your time and consideration. We will now take this time for board questions and tribal and public comments.
Thank you very much, Lauren, for your presentation. Are there any questions from board members?
This is Carmen. I want to say, well, first of all, it looks like they got a superstar team working on this matter. So that's really impressive, and I'm glad that it's gone so well. This is also a project that is rare in that it's kind of universally supported, and that's really special. And that doesn't happen on its own, right? It takes a lot of planning in advance and making sure everybody at least gets heard. So I can imagine the tremendous amount of work that goes into it. But even on top of that, this has a really special feeling of kind of justice and balance and importance and respect. And this feels different, and it feels great. So I want to commend you on the work that you've done and bringing this very important issue that maybe has sat for too long, bringing it to the front. So thank you very much for your work.
Okay, thank you very much, Carmen. If there are no other comments from board members, then we would now hear from any persons interested who is not a party to the proceeding, but who wish to comment. Janelle, do we have any interested parties that wish to comment on this item?
Yes, we do. We have 5, and we can start with Emily Maloney, representing Buena Vista Ranchera of Miwok Indians.
You may unmute.
Wonderful. Hope you all can hear me.
Yes, we do.
Well, good morning, everybody. And yes, my name is Emily Maloney. I'm the Water Program Coordinator for Buena Vista Rancheria of Miwok Indians, and I want to thank you for the opportunity to provide tribal comment today. I was directed by Chairwoman Rhonda Morningstar Pope Flores and the Tribal Historic Preservation Office Advisory Board to reiterate a comment letter that Buena Vista Rancheria submitted to the Water Board on October 27th, 2021. It was our letter in support of adopting these definitions into the Basin Plan. So I'll just be reading through that letter. So Buena Vista Rancheria would like to provide comments in support for and to urge the adoption of tribal beneficial uses and definitions to the Sacramento, San Joaquin, and Tulare Lake Basin plans. Buena Vista Rancheria supports the board in amending these basin plans to include the tribal beneficial use definitions, including tribal tradition and culture, tribal subsistence, and subsistence fishing. Water is sacred and essential to Buena Vista Rancheria, as it has been for all California Indians since time immemorial. These definitions are long overdue and are much needed to address the environmental injustices California Indians have endured due to the pollution of waterways, altered hydrologic conditions, loss of access to water essential for tribal lifeways. The definitions acknowledge the historic and present day use and significance of waters by and for California Indians. The Water Board's vision of ensuring the valley's aquifers and surface waters meet or exceed water qualities necessary to support all beneficial uses can no longer exclude tribal beneficial uses and must adopt these important definitions. Buena Vista Rancheria requests the board follow the directions of Governor Gavin Newsom's Executive Order N-1519 in acknowledging the harm inflicted upon California Indians and reaffirming Executive Order B-1011, government-to-government consultation. Buena Vista Rancheria requests the board adopt the definitions to its basin plans and swiftly move to designate water bodies with these definitions according to direct input and consultation from California tribes. Without the direct input and engagement from California tribes in creating the definitions and water body designations, the beneficial use process will not accurately nor adequately reflect the needs, values of tribal water uses. So thank you so much. I will end it there and appreciate the time.
Thank you very much, Emily. We appreciate your comments. Do we have any comments from the board? If not, we'll move on to the next presenter, public commenter. Janelle?
Miss Sarah Ryan's unmuted.
Good morning. My name is Sarah Ryan, and I'm the Environmental Director for the Big Valley Band of Pomo Indians. The tribe is located on Clear Lake, which is the largest natural freshwater lake in California. And I'm reading today partially from the 2018 letter that we submitted and some additional comments from the tribe. The tribe recommends that the Central Valley Regional Water Quality Control Board include and prioritize the inclusion of the two newly statewide adopted and approved tribal tradition and culture and tribal subsistence fishing beneficial uses by amending the water quality control plan for the Sacramento River and San Joaquin River basins. The adoption of these definitions will allow the tribes to move forward with designating water bodies and developing water quality objectives, which will protect the unique exposures of tribes. Many of the beneficial use designations within the existing water quality control plan for the Sacramento River and San Joaquin River basins were developed and assigned to surface water bodies before there were beneficial uses specifically related to the uses of California Native American tribes. When the basin plan was last updated, only swimming and wadable, Rec 1, and commercial and sports fishing, COM, were available in the Central Valley to protect human health from consumption of fish and activities that result in direct contact with water. These two beneficial uses did not provide human health protections for tribal beneficial uses of subsistence fishing or for traditional and cultural uses. As with other tribes on Clear Lake, the Big Valley Band of Pomo Indians is a fishing community and has always been a fishing community, with the tribal lands being on the shoreline of Clear Lake. The tribe's ancestral boundaries also include the Clear Lake tributaries along its western and southern shores. The tribe has regular ceremonies and other activities on Clear Lake and continues to gain sustenance from the plants, animals, and waters of Clear Lake. Clear Lake has impairments that are very concerning to the tribe. Methylmercury levels were determined to be in high levels in the fish, and the California Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment updated their fish consumption advisory in 2014 to reflect additional fish and shellfish that are consumed by local tribes. In addition, the Clear Lake Cyanotoxin Monitoring Program, which was begun by Big Valley and Elam Indian Colony in 2014, continued to monitor for cyanotoxins and did that this summer, 2021. Most likely due to drought and other factors, we began seeing anatoxin A, a potent neurotoxin, in multiple locations on the lake at warning levels as identified by the California Cyanobacteria Harmful Algal Bloom Network. Some sites this summer had microcystin result values over 160,000 micrograms per liter, which is over 200,000 times higher than recommendations for REC 1 exposure. These and other concerning water quality issues are why the tribe wants the regional board to prioritize the development of tribal beneficial uses, and why we are appreciative that the board has done that with including this activity on its triennial review. Please now take the steps to amend your basin plan so that we can move forward and protect the traditional lifeways of California Native American tribes. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you very much, Sarah. And any comments from board members? Okay, Janelle, our next commenter.
Yes, we have Sherry Norris, representing California Indian Environmental Alliance.
You are unmuted.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you for having us all here and giving us time to speak. My name is Sherry Norris. I am the Executive Director of the California Indian Environmental Alliance. I did take the oath. I wanted first to say that our first comment is that CIA supports the approval of the adoption of the tribal culture, tribal subsistence fishing and subsistence fishing definitions as were previously adopted by the State Water Resources Control Board under the SWB provision. So we definitely approve that and are very happy that it's before you today. We also asked that the letter that we submitted to the regional board by Enterprise Rancheria and our organization CIA on August 3rd, 2021 be entered into record, as our process recommendations in that document are still relevant. Some of them have been addressed and we're really encouraged to see that. The upcoming tribal meeting in April, the upcoming fact sheets, and the fact that the tribal coordinator, Robert LaRue, will be staying on with this process, we're really happy about. And we've noted that he's participated in statewide tribal meetings in the last 2 months, and we encourage this to continue. That said, I'll read a couple pieces from that letter that I wanted to highlight today as it relates to the very next steps and a moment ago. We asked that the regional tribal coordinator convene a region broad participatory tribal advisory committee of Central Valley tribes and tribal organizations with institutional knowledge to advise the process. This would allow for tribes to reach recommendations consensus, which would better support regional board staff, both in staff time and just knowing that what they're getting from everyone is what all of the tribes collectively have had a chance to talk through. Consultation is wonderful and should continue even with the TAC there. And this enables the tribes to have some conversations because we recognize that consultation agency and the tribe themselves. We like that tribal meetings can invite all the tribes from the area and they can move through different regions in the state as needed, and to allow for phone-in options. Remember that some of the tribes are still wary of COVID issues and still have very vulnerable populations within their constituency. That the water board continue to make the process updates available in a detailed, formally written format. And I'm seeing from what I just heard, there's going to be those fact sheets, which is great. That the regional board submits tribal submissions of their own data, or that each tribe can choose who will conduct surveys of their members. It's appropriate for tribes to be able to determine how they want this data gathered and by whom, because they're going into the communities, and tribes are sovereign nations. Some tribes have or are planning to conduct surveys of their own members. They would be interpreting that data and holding focus groups for their communities before submitting the outcomes of the surveys to the state to make sure it is accurately capturing the community. And that the regional board, the next one is that the regional board will public sensitive information. So creating a process for data is really important, and the tribal policy advisor, Anacita Agustinus, could help with that. Next, that the board elevate letters from tribal council as high quality and primary source evidence, and quickly provide tribes with information on what kinds of evidentiary submissions for coal and T-fish will be acceptable. And it sounds like that may be in this upcoming fact sheet. And then that the regional board be clear about their procurement process and criteria used for outside entities or contractors that will be used for tribal outreach. research and surveying of fish and cultural resources of tribal members. Tribes and tribal organizations with institutional knowledge of tribal beneficial uses should be considered, and Central Valley tribes should weigh in and identify who they'd like to complete these processes, and then have an opportunity to complete the processes themselves. And those are my comments for today, and I'm encouraged by what I heard earlier. So I just want to thank everyone, and absolutely, again, we recommend that these definitions be adopted by the board today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sherry. I appreciate your comments as well. And any comments from the board? Okay, let's move on. Janelle, our next presenter, thank you so much.
Yes, we have Debbie Rasmussen with representing the Enterprise Ranchera.
Good morning. I do support the adoption of this resolution for the tribal beneficial uses. I didn't know I was supposed to be speaking this morning, but I do support it. Thank you.
Thank you.
And that's enough, right? That's enough. Enough said right there.
Yeah. Any other speakers, Janelle?
We do have David Corey on with Farmer at Law.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't see David in the list of attendees.
Okay, so if we have no other presenters at this time, the board will now hear any closing remarks from staff.
Denise?
Yes.
Can I say something?
Sure, please.
Okay. Yeah, I just want to applaud the presenter and our public comments toward this topic. I think it's very important. The fact that we have a lot of many minority groups in America, and a lot of them try to come up and sustain some of their cultural and background. I think it's important. I think that speaks to the effort of equity in this country, and that leads to me remembering, this month being Black History Month. It's kind of somewhat go hand in hand of the background, the work that had done to lead to this type of situation that we recognize it and gonna move forward, recognizing it and appreciate the individual groups of people. So just want to say that. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those comments. We will now have closing remarks from staff.
I really want to thank the team for putting together this project. Lauren and Gabby have been wonderful. As you know, we had the presentation from Elizabeth just not too long ago. She shifted to a different project in a different agency. And I do want to thank Robert for his continuing engagement on these issues. There are a few people kind of more affable and more genuine in kind of their desire than the folks who are on this team to protect water quality for these folks. There's a lot of hard work ahead. Speaking to Ms. Norris's comments about what we will need to do to classify evidence from tribal communities, from tribes. We at the Central Valley Water Board want to keep that door open as wide as possible. We want to understand what the cultural values are that led to designations or that will lead to designations. And we want to be offered the widest spectrum of protections for those uses that we can within our laws and within our authority. So, it's a major step forward today. I want to thank our team for putting this presentation together, putting the Basin Plan amendments before the board today. We will have more on this to come as we individually look at water bodies and continue to engage with tribes about what uses are appropriate for those water bodies. So thanks to everybody who participated in this process. I recommend adoption of the Basin Plan amendment today.
Thank you very much, Patrick. I'd like to now turn it to our board members for any further discussion and questions, deliberation before we take a vote on this item. Any comments from the board members?
I'd move staff recommendation.
Okay, before we take make the motion, I'd just like to provide some comments. First of all, I really would like to commend Emily, Sarah, Sherry, and Debbie. Can't pronounce your last names, but your first names I remember. And most important, the conversation and the discussion you shared with us today. It was very important. I think the Governor Brown and Newsom and the executive orders and legislation that's been passed on behalf of the Native American population here in California, and the fact that we're now looking at recognition of their culture and how the water has had impact on that culture, and what we can do now to consider designated beneficial uses on behalf of the population, I think is critical. And as Sean and Carmen both mentioned, racial equity, this is the time and to address and correct the environmental justices. And I see that our staff is moving in that direction. My concern is that the process continues and that it moves forward, and we don't have delays, because we're talking about not only the culture, but of people, and for the contamination in the waters and all of those things that affect their culture and their consumption of food, all of those things. I mean, it's been happening for years. So now that we're at a point to begin to put things in place to make sure that the beneficial uses are there and are protected, that we do our best to continue to move the process forward. I had one question. I saw the different Native American populations that were identified there, and I did not see the Rancherias, Tachi Yokuts out of the Tulare Lake Basin. Has there been any outreach done to that indigenous population?
The tribes that were presented on the slides were only tribes and tribal organizations that submitted comments and an additional letter. So yes, outreach has happened. I can confirm later, but I believe that they should have been in the initial outreach that Elizabeth Betancourt did when she was hosting the board update and other board items. So yeah, once again, I can confirm that specific tribe has been included, but once again, the tribes that you saw were only the ones that submitted comments and letters.
Okay, and if that has not happened for your meeting April 5th, that I would just encourage you to continue to do that outreach, because that was the largest indigenous population in this part of the Central Valley.
Most definitely, yes.
All right. It was a great presentation, and thank you all very much. And so now, Nick, if you would like to proceed with your motion, please, I would appreciate it.
Thank you. Yeah, with that, I'd like to move the staff recommendation.
I second that.
Okay. Thank you very much. It's been moved in second. Janelle, would you call the roll, please?
Yes. Board Member Abdus?
Yes.
Board Member Yang?
Aye.
Board Member Breyer?
Yes.
Board Member Bradford?
Yes.
Vice Chair Ramirez?
Yes.
Acting Chair Kadara?
Yes. Motion carries. And I think before we go to our next agenda item, yeah, I see you applauding, so I'll do the same thing, Sean. I'd like for us to take a break before you guys tell me it's time to take a break. So we have our next item, 21, Malaga County Water District Wastewater Treatment Facility, Fresno County. We'll come back in 5 minutes, 10 minutes. So at 10:40, we'll come back, and that will be our next item.
All right.
All right. Thank you
All
all.
right, thank you.
You okay, Paul? Did you just buy those new posts or what? Like, together, it's a wonderful place to be. You just bought those new stuff or what? Okay, no, like this. Okay. Are you guys coming home yet? Okay, all right, well, I am,
Board Member Yang, your microphone is on.
1, 2, 3.
Okay, we're ready to get back in session. Okay, we're ready for our agenda item number 21, Malaga County Water District Waste Treatment Facility, Fresno County. This is the time and place for a public hearing to consider an order vacating administrative civil liability order from I keep getting tongue-tied, sorry guys. Magala County Water District. Is there anyone present who is contesting the proposed action and wishes to provide comments to the board? No? Okay, since there's no one present to contest this matter, the board will proceed based on the agenda, materials, and the record. Are there any late revisions, staff?
Acting Chair Kadara, we do have two speakers here. I just want to verify, since we're just a minute before we expected to start, Mr. Costanza in particular, I believe, had indicated he would be speaking on behalf of Malaga County Water District.
Okay.
Yeah, if we could wait one more minute before restarting.
Okay.
Mr. Costanzo is unmuted.
Good morning.
Good morning.
The proposed order before you. I'm Malaga County Water District's attorney, by the way. The proposed order before you is one that is revised from a prior tentative order that was issued by your staff. The revision basically eliminated a suggestion that you could simply resuscitate what is a 6-year-old complaint and set it for rehearing before this board. And that was eliminated from the proposed order, but unfortunately, that same suggestion has now resurfaced in responses to comments that were filed by your staff. And as we noted in the comments originally, you have no jurisdiction to do that, consistent with Water Code Section 133.23. So contrary to what appears in the responses to our comments, if that were to occur, we would not be appearing before this board to express our objections to that. We would instead be required to file again in court and enjoin the board from entertaining that resuscitated complaint. Doing so would also pretty clearly violate the Superior Court's order, and we would be seeking to have the board held in contempt. That's the only comment I had.
Thank you very much. Legal counsel?
Yes, thank you. As previously indicated, there was an initial tentative draft circulated and provided for comment. One of the comments did take issue with some of the provisions regarding next steps following the board's vacation of the ACL order. The response to comments does explain that, and that record is before the board. It's staff's position that the discretion regarding any pending complaint following a vacation of the ACL order is fully within the assistant executive officer, and to the extent there are objections to this board's jurisdiction, any of the board members, in particular advisory members' participation in a subsequent hearing, those objections can be heard later. But that really is the next step. Before the board is just a very simple, brief order vacating the administrative civil liability order, really at the direction of the Fresno County Superior Court to do so following the writ of remand. And those proceedings are detailed in the very short order before the board.
Thank you very much. Janelle, do we have any other persons wishing to speak on this item?
We do have David Boyers from the Office of Enforcement.
Okay, go ahead, please.
David, you may unmute.
Good morning, Acting Chair Kadar and board members. I do not have any comments in response to Mr. Costanza's assertions on this matter. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so is that all we have for comments, Janelle?
That is.
Okay, thank you very much. Staff, do we have any late revisions on this item?
There are no late revisions.
Okay. Do we have any, does council have any issues to discuss, any further issues to discuss at this time?
No, thank you.
Okay. The hearing is now closed and the chair will entertain a motion to adopt the order vacating the administrative civil liability.
So moved.
Okay. It's been moved. I need a second, please.
This is Carmen. I will second.
Okay. And Janelle, would you please call the roll?
Yes. Board Member Abdus?
Yes.
Board Member Ramirez?
Yes.
Board Member Brar?
Yes.
Board Member Bradford?
Yes.
Board Member Yang?
Aye.
I guess I already called Vice Chair Ramirez. Acting Chair Kadar?
Yes. Thank you very much. Motion carries. Okay. Okay. So we've moved past that item, and so now we're at the real big item, the election of chair and vice chair. Did I miss anything, executive officer? Is that where we are?
That is exactly where we are.
Okay, thank you very much. This is the time where we will vote on a chair and vice chair. And serving in this acting capacity has been a little challenge for me, but willingly I've done it. So we're gonna move forward with election of the chairperson first and vice chair, but I would just like to make a comment, the importance of taking on this position and the commitment that it requires for vice and chair, for the pre-agenda meetings to the when you get called upon, when things happen, emergencies happen, we have a duty and responsibility to make ourselves available for this service. And so I just want to remind all of us that as we make the decision of who that person will be, that comes with it the commitment and duty and responsibility. And so with that, amongst the board, if you guys would like to nominate, it's your call at this time. Don't everybody speak at once.
Well, this is Carmen, and I'll say that I've enjoyed being on the board tremendously, but I just cannot cut out the time necessary to be in a leadership position. Not as, I don't know if I would get enough votes to be supported, but at this time, I recognize what an important role that is. So I am not willing to take on any, either the chair or the vice chair role at this time.
We're still glad you're on our board though, Carmen, for sure.
This is Sean. Denise, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. We're voting
Okay.
we're making a motion on, not a motion, but we're nominating for chairperson at this time.
Okay. Is it open for comment?
Yes, who
Okay.
would like to nominate?
Well, just want to say that, I miss Chair, our former Chair, Lonely. He's was really good at what he did. and you are pretty good too. But unfortunately, you sound like you're not going to have time to sit on that position going forward. But I believe we do have good board members that could serve that position. And I look forward to hearing the individuals that want to come up front and for us to vote for it. So I look forward to that.
Denise?
Yes.
Hi, this is Raji. I agree with Sean. I miss Dr. Longley. I think you do an amazing job. You've done an amazing job, so is Carmen. But I understand what Carmen is saying, and I understand what you are saying, Denise. And I would like to nominate someone. I think Mark. I would like to nominate Mark. I think Mark's done a wonderful job. I've enjoyed working with him on the board. If you're interested, Mark, I'd like to hear your comments. But I think that would be really great for our board, you know. So I'd love to hear from you as well, but I myself would not be interested in being chair or vice chair. So Mark, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Raji. I mean, Carl's going to be a hard act to follow, to put it mildly.
Well, how did you guys throw me out there?
And you're
Denise, you're a hard act to follow. We all know that. You and Dr. Longley, like, you know, we're not worthy.
And I was honestly hoping that Denise would have time for the chair position, but I have talked to her and she indicates she's got a lot of balls in the air, which is great. I have the benefit of being retired and my kids are all grown and gone. So all I have as a conflict is my passion for recreating and traveling and so on. So I am willing to step in. I'll throw my hat in the ring. And with the caveat that, and I mentioned this to Denise, I will be gone for the June meeting. I've got a destination wedding that I have to go to out of the country. And other than that, I will attend every board meeting and make myself available as needed for a lot of the other activities that the chair is engaged in. So yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you. And in concert with that, I'd like to nominate Denise to remain in a leadership role as the vice chair if she's willing to do that.
No, I won't say no. I don't want to be the chair. That's not me. But for the backup and the involvement I've played over the years in that capacity, I'm very familiar with it, and I would feel comfortable serving in that capacity if that's what's needed at this time.
So if I can chime in, I appreciate those comments and appreciate the leadership here. I mean, if I may, do we need to make a motion? I will make the motion that we make Mark the chair and Denise the vice chair.
This is Carmen. I would second that. Yeah, Raj, you try to jump in, try to elbow me out. No, I'm kidding.
Nick, you were so quick to motion like the last couple days.
Hey, he's moving up in the ranks. He's going to be in the seat pretty soon, in the hot seat pretty soon. So it's been moved in second. Janelle, can we get a roll call?
Yes. Board Member Abdus?
Yes.
Board Member Bradford?
Yes.
Board Member Brar?
Yes.
Board Member Yang?
Aye.
Vice Chair Ramirez?
Yes.
Acting Chair Kadara?
Yes. Okay, I'm out the hot seat. That sounds pretty good to me. Thank you, board members. Thank you for the support for the both of us, and thank you for the leadership role you play for our region. Outstanding board, and I'm glad to be a part of it. You have any comments you'd like to make, Mark?
Yeah, just thanks, everybody. I enjoy working with everybody on this call as well, and look forward to continued mentoring by Denise, because I've observed a lot, but honestly, the last 2/3 of it has been on a computer. So I look forward to doing it in person in April in Fresno, and continuing and doing things in person, because I think we do a lot over Zoom, but we lose a lot too by not interacting personally. So again, look forward to that.
All right. Thank you.
Congratulations, Denise and Mark. Welcome aboard as our now chair and vice chair. Looking forward to work with both of you and the rest of the board member, along with the staff.
All right. Thank you very much. So, Mark, you want to take over this last agenda item?
You didn't take long, did you? Just
it's easy to pass the buck when you're not the chair.
well, and it's easy to pass the buck on this one because this is a new assignments for the board working groups that Patrick initiated between the last meeting and this meeting. So I will hand it over to Patrick. I believe he's spoken with all of us about our preferences and thoughts on the new proposal to restructure the working groups.
Yeah, no, and just to kind of conclude the earlier item, I truly appreciate Denise, your service as chair. It is not, it's always a huge role, as evidenced by all the communications that you reported. I know even the short tenure as chair, I know was inspirational to a number of our staff, and so I really am grateful for you to step into that role for these couple of meetings.
Thank you.
It was important, you know, short term, but I think it was very important for staff to see that as well. And Mark, you know, like I've told you and each one of the board members, we are here to make you succeed, no matter what kind of a role you want to step into as board. Every single member of this team is capable of being chair. Resources to make sure that it's as smooth as possible, even though you, like Denise said, you will be on the hot seat on occasion, trying to make some rulings and trying to move the mission of this organization forward. So again, my gratitude to everybody stepping into leadership roles. It's not always easy. You are a volunteer board. You know, the stipend doesn't even begin to cover, I know, that mental energy and that you put into working through these items. With that, you know, we'll transition to the next item, item number 22. As you mentioned, Chair Bradford, we are restructuring the work groups, largely because a lot of the work groups that were previously composed have essentially finished their mission or fizzled a little bit over time. I really want to make sure that these working groups are and enable us to go out there into the field to do things with a little bit more flexibility and to engage in members of the public and communities that we who our regulations will affect. So that was kind of the idea behind it. I think that we will be getting out into the field more often. You will be able to meet with staff more often when you sign up for these working groups. We can, you know, at your pleasure, walk through them and see who is interested in serving on various assignments here. I think, you know, for one, for group number 3, which is the agricultural working group, which really centers on our irrigated lands regulatory program. We do have the current work group members are Nick Avdis and Sean Yang. I would suggest for that work group that it be kept intact, largely because we do have that small grower summit that we planned for the morning of March 3rd that both board member Yang and board member Avdis have been involved in planning. You know, we can, the working groups can shift anytime, but I would certainly posit that for the near term at least, we keep that group intact. It'd be great to have 3 members on a working group, but legally, all of a sudden, when you get 3 together, it is an advisory board and subject to all the requirements of Baker Keene, has to do everything in public, and so things change just a little bit there. So that would be kind of the first issue of kind of housekeeping as we move forward. And again, if there's anybody opposed, let me know. And if anybody's had interest in kind of joining up with that group in the future or kind of reshuffling the deck, we can certainly do that. But any comments on that one?
You keep getting soft and speaking, Patrick, so you got to speak a little bit louder.
I can't wait till we're in person again.
Okay. Okay.
I got the camera with the cool microphone, and then Windows updated, and all of a sudden the microphone isn't what it used to be. So the same issues. We're seeing that everywhere.
I think that sounds great that Sean and Nick continue to serve on the Ag Working Group.
Right. So no further comments on that one. I'll go back to number 2. Number 2 is a Basin Assessment Work Group. As we talked about yesterday, with the it's essentially working on all those issues that we talked about in the triennial review. Although we will acknowledge that there are work groups, the CV salts and drinking water group would be separate and apart from that. So kind of the issues specifically related to CV salts and drinking water would be separate. But essentially everything else that we discussed in the triennial review would fall under the purview of this working group. And that would include the tribal beneficial uses like you just heard about earlier this morning. I want to know if there's anybody who kind of is expressing interest in that one. There's plenty of opportunities for engagement and likely, we will be getting out in person and seeing some of these issues, whether it's mercury, whether it's tribal beneficial uses, or some of the decisions that we need to make with respect to prioritizing projects up for basin plan consideration.
Patrick, can I ask a question? As we start talking about these working groups, can you give us a parameter of what kind of time commitment this might be, right? Whether it's going to be by Zoom, whether we're going to be site, because I think that helps me consider, like, as far as intellectual interest, I love this. As far as time, I don't know. So can you advise?
It is what you make it. I mean, honestly, I think it is what you make it.
Ooh, for that answer.
We have staff with like encyclopedic knowledge on all of these areas. So if you want to kind of get, in-depth presentations, or if you would like to, I think even our meetings with some of the tribal folks will be Zoom participation. Or if in the past, there have been working groups that really said, hey, staff, we know you're going to be doing all the work. We don't necessarily have the time to attend the meetings, but afterwards, let's debrief. Let me make sure that I'm staying abreast of what's happening in this area, and I'll pick and choose if there's an issue that jumps out that I want to be, involved in. So it could be as simple as kind of regular briefings. Again, I really want to make it flexible so that anybody who is interested can be involved, and the level of involvement can kind of be calibrated to the amount of time that you have to spare. Because again, this is stuff that you're not compensated for, just kind of extracurricular activities. So we want to keep it as flexible as possible.
Carmen, I think that would be a role that you could play. I mean, that would be something I personally think you would make a significant contribution. And as Patrick said, it's what time you make it. But there are a lot of critical issues in there. And I know how you speak and the issues that you care about. That would be one of the areas I think you could be some great support. And it is flexible.
Well, thank you. And so, Patrick, so I will express, sort of an interest to participate. And, the latter part of the description where, you try to get out there, but if you can't, certainly a debriefing, the way that works best, I think, for me is when it's calendared, right? Like every whatever we get on schedule. So, if staff is willing to do that with me, I would certainly love to jump into this. I've been on the board since 2011. I think I have a good working knowledge of a lot of what we do, and I'd like to see how it's developing.
That's why I suggested you. You're really the senior.
I am the senior.
Yes, you are.
That may be true. I think, is that true? It's
yeah, she is the senior. I'm second.
Yeah.
She's been here 11 years, and I came on in 2014, so she's got 3 years on me for sure.
Oh, and still so youthful looking.
Right on.
Hey, Patrick, it might be helpful to know how many working groups are there on your new list? I don't have that email up in front of me.
There's 6. There's 6. And Mark, by default, you are on the first one, which is the executive work group. Really, that's less of a working group than it is just a Carl and Denise got involved in a lot of issues, and I think Carl kind of set the standard for what the board chair did, but it wasn't written down anywhere, and it certainly wasn't as transparent as we'd like it to the public. So putting this work group together and putting that description out there, I think makes it a little bit more plain about what the chair and vice chair's role is, about planning meetings and making some rulings on items that come before the board. So that's really what that work group is. Apologies for skipping over that. Then to kind of run through Basin Assessment Work Group, which is what we're discussing now, as number 2. The Agricultural Work Group is what we just previously discussed, that Nick and Sean are on. Number 4 is Forest Management and Wildfire. And again, I think that's kind of one of those issues where, things don't happen quickly until they do. We've got a few big items that we're working on with the feds, most importantly, a non-point source permit that would regulate a huge swath of federal lands. We have a little bit with the SB 901 utility corridor work in that area. That's of interest. It's rapidly kind of an evolving landscape where there may be additional resources that pop up, additional laws that will likely get adopted, and God forbid, but it is pretty likely that there will be more massive fires on the horizon that we'll have to deal with. Next up for the group number 5 is CV Salt's Drinking Water Program and SB 1215 Wastewater Consolidation. I think this is the group that most heavily works with the disadvantaged communities within our region. Those are the kind of 3 areas where it's most critical that we have their involvement as we kind of plan out long-term strategies to provide safe, clean, and affordable drinking water consistent with the human right to water. So that's kind of a separate work group. It's one where I know, Denise, you've been involved simply because of your engagement with CV Salt and with the early action plans. And I would certainly hope that you could continue to be a part of that one, and the other membership on that one is open. And last but not least, Litigation and Petitions work group. The big one.
What's the last one again?
Litigation and Petitions. As all the board members who've been around for a little while know, we have our meetings every 2 months, and very often kind of litigation and negotiations, we'd like to kind of have the ability to check in with a group that is staying on top of that. Even if the litigation is more long-term, that like the dairy litigation that's happening right now, it's both active litigation and there's an active petition going on with that one. There's litigation involving the East San Joaquin. Procedurally, it's important that we have some members of the team that keep abreast of that, and other litigation risks that may come up that we would want to discuss, and things like waters of the United States and overall legal strategies for the board. It's important. I mean, it's kind of reflected in the case that, we've got a couple attorneys on the board. That's usually how there's a lot of that. That's how it goes. Most boards in this realm do have some attorney presence on it because there's so much litigation, exposure to litigation, and kind of navigation of legal risks as we move forward with our regulations. So those are the proposals. And again, I think we can circle back, or again, at your pleasure, if you want to address one over the other.
I'm just going to say this. I haven't heard Raji speak, but I'd certainly like her to be on that CV Salts if she's interested in.
Yep, you read my mind. That's where I was going.
Okay, and working with Carmen on the Basin Plan Amendment, the Basin Assessment Work Group. I mean, I know it addresses a number of issues, but I see we all have to. We got 6 boards here. I mean, 6 working groups, and we're 6 of us. And so until we get that 7th person, it would be good if we had 2 people. And since Carmen has been here, and you're third after us, so you're stepping right into something that you can strengthen your gifts in, and you got a perfect leader to move you in that direction.
Yeah.
And you've dealt with so many issues already.
No, I'm good, Denise. That sounds good to me. The Basin Plan and the Dip Point CV Salts Work Group. I don't know how much work me and Carmen will get done together, but just kidding.
Have a lot of private meetings.
Supposed to be secret, Raji, secret.
No,
Hey,
it'll
Patrick.
be great.
Getting text from Carmen saying that she wants to do a site visit on all 120 wineries that are regulated.
I've already saw like 110 of them. It's okay.
Hey, Patrick.
Yeah, Sean.
Yeah, I want to express interest in serving in topic of, I think, involved with drinking water.
Okay.
I think it's item 5.
So again, if that's up for debate, if
Is
if
that
you,
what they just signed up for? Item 5?
Yeah.
Okay. Never mind then. Yeah. No, that's fine.
we have, so you're on the ag work group. You did make the trip out to see that wildfire. If you want to continue engagement on those issues, that certainly is available. Litigation and petitions. You do not have to be an attorney to be involved with that one as well. I know you have a role in local government and local school districts, so that's something that certainly would, you could join up for that as well. And I will say for all the board members, it's great to have 2. If it doesn't shape up to 2, that's okay as well. We'll just voluntold whoever signs up for the 7th board member slot when they get appointed that's what they got to fill. So it's up to you guys how you want to distribute those positions.
Well, Patrick, I'm definitely interested in staying on with that forest management and wildfire working group. And then I guess Denise and I are on the executive, whatever committee work group as well by default. So I'm definitely in for those 2.
Mr. Nick, you going to be the litigation guy in petitions?
Yeah, I was just going to chime in. I'd be happy to do it. It sounds like something right up my alley. Although I'm not a litigator, I'm interested in sort of the subject matter. So I'm definitely interested in that. So yeah, the ag working group, look forward to continuing serving on that with Sean. And yes, would very much like to serve on number 6.
Patrick, which one you mentioned that I should be on? There's a total of 6.
Wildfire's still open for you if you want to join up with that one.
Why not?
That's good.
So I'll take my second favorite L if it's open, litigation.
All right. All right. I think that wraps out about everything. And again, these are totally flexible. It's the type of thing where if we see the need arising, we can convene a separate working group. If there's overlapping duties, we can reconstitute them. This is totally really for your benefit, to make sure that you are knowledgeable about all the issues that the board will be addressing. But my commitment is to get you guys into the field, to take a look at some of these things. With respect to litigation, it's one of those we're actively involved with regulating a number of dairies. Denise was able to make a dairy tour out there. Nick, I know you've expressed interest in taking a look at one of those facilities. I think that's next up. Dairy industry would be more than happy to host you and see you. And Carmen, if you'd like to join with that, we can make that happen. Wildfire, there will be continued kind of actions happening. I think we've got something in motion to make sure that you can tour not just the northern part where it's burned, but there was extensive fire and fire rehabilitation happening down the southern part of our region too, outside the Fresno area. So we've got a lot planned, and I think we'll continue to try and keep your portfolio full and tailor it to how things are going. So with that, I'm set. Unless you guys want to have additional discussion here, we're in pretty good shape.
We don't have lunch here, so there's no reason to stay.
No cookies.
Yeah.
No cookies.
I do want to get a point of clarification before we adjourn this meeting. So from my understanding, we are set forward to be in person meeting, right, in April.
Yes, that's correct.
If we don't have any state order or from the government, I mean, I'm sure it's a governor. Is that the correct understanding?
That's correct.
Okay. Well, I look forward to it.
That's correct, and we'll be working to make sure that you've got the logistics all planned out. I think the first and foremost, most important thing is that we will likely, and we'll conclude item 22, and then usually when we wind down these board meetings, we talk about the next board meeting. So I think that's if it's your pleasure, Vice Chair Kadara and Chair Bradford, we'll go into that right now.
Sure.
Okay.
Good. All right. So most important thing about the April meeting thus far is we are going to.
The date of the April meeting?
April meeting is 21st and 22nd.
Okay.
And I think the big thing that we're doing on the 21st is a commemoration of Carl's service. We have put in with our legislative liaison to get a commemoration, a resolution by Senate or the Assembly. We will be talking with members, other executive officers, other board chairs and vice chairs who have worked with Carl in the past to come out either digitally or in person for that, and certainly some former staff, current staff, to celebrate him with a resolution. And we will also be convening a dinner in Carl's honor as well. And we're kind of in the stages of planning that now that we're kind of given the go-ahead to have these meetings in person, where those efforts are underway. And for all of you who have not traveled out to board meetings, we will be getting all the travel arrangements squared away, reserving a block of hotel rooms. My suggestion, what we usually do when we meet either in Reading or Fresno, is delay the start a little bit on day one. So start around 10 or even perhaps a little later, so that you can have the option of traveling out there in the morning. I know board member Brar often travels, so getting the start delayed a little bit helps that out. And then we definitely endeavor to end a little early, if not a lot early, on the Friday to make sure that there's adequate travel time on Friday evening as well. So that's going to be our plan for the April board meeting, and we'll work with Kelly, Janelle, Mindy when she gets back to set up your travel arrangements. Make sure that you have all that you need to make the travel out to Fresno.
Patrick, I know last time we met in Fresno, we went on a field trip to the dairy down there, which was really helpful. Is there any plans for incorporating any kind of a field trip?
Not this go around. I think things are still a little too touch and go with respect to COVID protocols, but I think we'll be looking to do that certainly when we, Clint will be planning one in October when we go up to Reading. There's plenty of areas to see, whether it's abandoned mines, wildfire, what have you. And I think ordinarily we will be making arrangements to do those tours. I will say, and this is fairly long-term planning because it's a little over a year from now, but I think the next meeting we will, in the southern part of our region, so it'd be probably April of 2023, we'll plan on being there in Bakersfield. That's what we were actually planning on when the COVID protocols kind of kicked off a couple of years ago. We really want to get an oil field tour in there. Really want to get a meeting together in Bakersfield. So we'll be working on those logistics for 2023. So that's kind of what the long-term plan is.
Patrick, if there's a possibility for our newer board members, if there's a possibility for something to happen in June, I don't know if it is, but consider some kind of tour there. I know you mentioned the Sacramento Valley Waste Treatment Facility, Regional Sand. So if something to consider there, because the more our board members have a good sense of all of this stuff that we're doing. So I'm just throwing that out. If it doesn't happen in June,
Absolutely.
maybe August.
No, that we're thinking of either a tour of wastewater treatment facility. Hopefully SAC Regional will be able to kind of line that up for us in June. If not, there are other areas where we could convene and take a look at areas with potentially harmful algal blooms within the Delta. Lots of things that we're thinking of for June. So we'll try and make that happen. Hopefully we won't be tossed any curveballs by Omicron or something else like that by June. But we're certainly, that's absolutely what we're trying to do.
Okay.
Yeah, Denise, thank you for bringing that up. And yeah, I am all for it. So.
Okay.
Good. Was there anything else on our agenda? I think that was the last item.
That's it. That's it.
Well, I guess this will be the first time I adjourn the meeting.
Congratulations.
I do want to point out my term only lasts through next September, September 23. So the rest of you need to start thinking about what your future holds.
I'm due for reappointment in this year, so I'll start that process pretty darn soon.
Yeah. So Patrick, if you have any influence, don't let her get away.
I don't think they're going to let her get away, even if we ask.
Good. All right. Well, thanks everybody. And look forward to our next meeting in person in Fresno. And I hope David brings some cookies for us. And we get a chance to send Carl off in high fashion. So.
And Chair Bradford, don't forget to say that the new board members have to pay for dinner that first time.
Right. Well,
remember?
More important.
Remember?
Oh, is that something that it's
have a great weekend.
Expensible, right?
Yeah, you don't know our hazing ritual yet, but it'll be good.
All right. Hey, whatever you guys say, well, me and Nick will do.
Uh-oh. I don't know about that.
Hey, speak for yourself. I'm going to play a little hard to get here. Okay, so.
Okay. All right, guys.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks.
Have a lovely weekend.
Have a good weekend, everybody.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, I will end this meeting.
Thank you, Gene. Have a good weekend.
Thank you all.
Bye.